Well, Daniel, you had a brief snippet of history when I talked about when we did our tribute to the now late great Johnny Walker, Mr. Wrestling 2. But now I've got my glasses on so I can clearly see to the past, back when Mr. Wrestling 2 and mass wrestlers in the South were icons and were selling out crowds up and down territories statewide, back when titles were called belts, and you can actually call them belts and get a title shot at a belt, like with Mr. Wrestling 2, 10-time Georgia heavyweight champion. Um, and back when wrestling was wrestling and not, as you see it now, sports entertainment. This is the Wrestling Historian. We're going to go back to June 4th, 1979. Madison Square Garden, a very interesting card took place. The opening bout was Tito Santana defeated Jose Estrada. And you figure, well, big deal. Well, that was Tito Santana's WWF debut. That was his first match in the WWF, June 4th, 1979.
Wow.
On that same card in Madison Square Garden, there was a 20-man battle royal, and the winner would get $10,000. And the winner of that battle royal, which only lasted 8 minutes and 17 seconds, Dan,
All right.
was the great Hussein Arab, who we would later know as the Iron Sheik. And because he won that 20-man battle royal, he got a title shot against the WWF heavyweight champion Bob Backlund later on that night.
Wow.
Interesting thing about that battle royal, Dan, that the great Hussein Arab, Iron Sheik, won that night, that was the first battle royal in the history of Madison Square Garden. Never been a battle royal, ever. And not until June 4th, 1979. So the first battle royal ever held in Madison Square Garden, the winner was the Iron Sheik.
Wow.
Well, later on that night, he had his title match with Bob Backlund. Backlund was accompanied by his manager, Arnold Skolin, and Freddie Blassie couldn't make it, so Lou Albano walked Iron Sheik, Hussein Arab, to the ring, and their title match went 30 minutes and 40 seconds. And Backlund won it with his patented atomic drop. But before that, those two, now I saw those two wrestle at the Spectrum, and the Sheik has always said in broken English that Backlund was his favorite opponent because those two would put on a clinic of amateur wrestling. You had two great amateur wrestling styles. Iron Sheik Khosrow, Dazarov, was an Olympian wrestler, trained also by Vern Gagne in amateur shoot style techniques. But he and Backlund would spend just as much time on the mat trying to out wrestle each other as they did traditional wrestling punches and kicks. So they went 30 minutes and 40 seconds before Backlund pinned him with his finisher, the atomic drop. But that was all in one night at Madison Square Garden, June 4th, 1979. On that same date, June 4th, 1986, Daniel, in Argyle, Texas, a young Kerry Von Erich, riding his motorcycle with shorts and no shoes, crashed into the back of a parked police car on his motorcycle and suffered a dislocated hip and major damage to his right foot, and had to undergo 13 hours of surgery. Now, the rumor still is, and we still don't have confirmation, whether Kerry's foot was amputated during surgery or if it was fused and he wrestled in a failed comeback bid and did further damage to it, and then it was amputated. But either way, after that, Kerry Von Erich wrestled with a prosthesis. Uh, I remember in a Wrestling World magazine, it wasn't in the After magazines. It was one of those lesser known wrestling magazines where Kerry Von Erich had a match with Colonel De Beers. And I remember I didn't take it much for granted because it wasn't an After magazine, but in this match with Colonel De Beers in Las Vegas, that Kerry's boot came off, and the fans could see that Kerry had no foot. And there
Holy
was no
jeez.
pictures of it. It was just written down there. So I was like, oh, that's way out of base, and that's kind of hard to believe. And because Kerry went on to have his career, he already had a successful career, but after this motorcycle accident and after a year off, he continued his wrestling career very well in world class, where he was undisputed champion, all the way to the WWF, where he became Intercontinental Champion, winning the belt right here in Philadelphia at SummerSlam 1990 by defeating former AWA champion Kurt Hennig with the discus punch, and having a successful career in the WWF, all with one foot and wearing a prosthesis. But it all started, I remember, in the previous Wrestling Historian, we talked about Brian Pillman's Hummer accident and what his career would have been had it not been for that accident. Kerry Von Erich, what his career, he still had a successful career, but had that motorcycle accident not occurred, and the pain addiction and the chemicals that he used to fight that pain may not have amplified and may not have led to his premature death. So, but the motorcycle accident that would claim Kerry's foot occurred June 4th, 1986. June 6th, speaking of notorious incidents, June 6th, 1985, Dan, was when Ken Patera and Mr. Saito were found guilty of charges stemming from the McDonald's incident. I don't know if this will ever qualify as a Dark Side of the Ring episode, but for fans who don't know, Ken Patera and Mr. Saito, while wrestling in the AWA in 1985, after a match in Waukesha, Wisconsin, went to get something to eat at a McDonald's. And apparently this is one of those cases where it looked like it was open because the lights were all on, but in actuality, they were closed. So when Mr. Saito and Ken Patera couldn't get served at this McDonald's, Ken Patera allegedly threw a
Allegedly.
boulder, one of those big heavy rocks outside of you see of most McDonald's entrances, threw it straight through the window.
Just picks it up and chucks it.
And chucks it. Now, Ken Patera has been known to have a temper.
No. Really?
Way. Going back to Jim Cornette, I don't mean to keep bringing his name up, but the man has as much as a curmudgeon as he is. He's got a ton of really great stories. When Ken Patera was wrestled in Tennessee, one of the incredibly old vintage soda machines didn't work and took Ken Patera's money, which may have been a whole 75 cents at the time. So when Ken Patera didn't get a soda, he lifted the entire machine and shook it to get his soda out.
Give me my money!
In a fit of rage. But Patera lifted this thing. I mean, yeah. So that was over 75 cents. So not getting served after wrestling at a McDonald's, he heaved a boulder through a McDonald's window. Later on, back at the hotel room, the police were called, and they were asked about the whereabouts of Mr. Patera and Mr. Saito, Mr. Saito, and they were at the hotel room, and cops knocked on the door, and Mr. Saito answered it, and they were looking for the man who threw the boulder through the McDonald's, and Mr. Saito said, Dave's not here, man, and tried to send the cops away, telling that Ken Patera wasn't there. Mr. Patera, in fact, was there. A scrum ensued, and no more than 20 police officers were on hand, had to be called in to subdue Ken Patera and Mr. Saito, who beat up their fair share of policemen. in an attempt to get them to arrest them. So Ken Patera was charged with 2 counts of battery on a police officer and a 1 count of criminal damage to property. And Mr. Saito was convicted of 3 counts of battery on a police officer and 1 count of obstruction of justice for
Wow.
not letting the police. Both did jail time. Uh, Mr. Saito, a lesser sentence, but Ken Patera, 2 years, uh, was out, and that would later go on to be an angle after he was fired from the AWA. Go figure. And that later went on to become an angle in the WWF, his real life jail sentence. And it reminded me of not to the one unfortunate thing I did see on WWE lately was the Jeff Hardy.
Oh, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. I don't even.
Well, it's another a case of why would you take someone's real life tragedy or a bad story and turning it into an angle for you? A, it's in bad taste, and B, if you're going along with it, why?
It has never. Because they have a job they can't lose.
Yeah.
I mean, the last person that said no finally said yes to the wrong thing and he died.
I agree.
I mean, it has never worked out for any party. Writing that into real life, I can't think of anything when it has to do with drug or alcohol addiction, it working out on TV or for the better of the parties involved in their personal lives, rehashing that crap on the air. Not that I can recall.
Yeah. And Ken Patera, like you just said, had no place else to go. WWF, Vince McMahon, his father, had always been good to Ken Patera. Ken Patera had always been a loyal employee to the WWF, even when Ken Patera held an NWA title while he was the Intercontinental Champion, and never missed a date, never missed a booking, never canceled, never no-showed. So him getting to be on the WWF and having his criminal past exploited for an angle, Ken Patera wasn't in any position to say no. But that all happened. He was sentenced June 6th, 1985.
Just off the top of my head, they
Mhm.
sort of rehashed it in the WWF when Jake was back.
Yeah.
And Lawler was heckling him about alcohol the whole time. They
Mhm.
rehashed it with Scott Hall. That didn't work out too well.
No.
Could have been worse. They rehashed it with Hawk.
Yeah.
That didn't work out too well. Almost Jeff Hardy is. It's said by people who are recovering that it's never over. The battle is never over. It is a daily battle every single day. Why you have to write that into a storyline? And this is not snowflake bullshit crap. This isn't get over it. This is a serious thing that you people who are judging my comments about it, sitting there at home, who've never had to deal with any of that kind of crap, have no idea what you're talking about. It's stupid. It immediately takes anybody who's ever had the inkling of an addiction problem not want to watch it. And I skipped it. I didn't care what happened after that. I skipped that segment. I moved on. It's 2020. Stop putting that in your storyline. It's stupid.
Yeah, because you're always an addict. That never goes away. You don't get over it. You're never cured.
Same thing with the abortion storyline.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Mm.
Not the abortions. The miscarriage storyline. Abortions or miscarriages. Stop.
Yeah.
Both of them. Knock it off.
Staying on that date, June 6th, 1993, Shawn Michaels regained the Intercontinental Championship from his former tag team partner, Marty Jannetty, on that date during a TV taping, June 6th, 1993. But what's special about it was he regained the Intercontinental title from Marty Jannetty with help from his new bodyguard, making his WWE debut, Diesel, formerly Vinny Vegas, formerly Oz.
No, we don't talk about
formerly Blade Master. But that was June 6th was his was the
Master,
WWF debut of Kevin Nash, of
the
Blade
Master
actually.
Blasters is so stupid. That's so stupid.
Yes.
And we're laughing against. Oh, thanks for coming on Twitch, Case. I appreciate that. Ooh, Twitch room. Yes, thank you. It's. I think the Master Blasters might be worse than Oz, and that's pretty bad.
Yes.
With all due
But
respect to Al Green,
obviously the
not
great
the Reverend Al Green.
I can already say one of the great R&B singers of all time, and a
Kevin Nash made
wonderful
that joke
wrestler.
on Thunder
Yeah.
already.
Darn.
Uh,
But add the Master Blasters to the Mel Gibson tribute lineage of all the professional wrestlers that the Road Warrior has produced. Just from one movie, you
that's
got the
true.
you got the Road Warriors, you got Lord Humongous, you got the Master Blasters, you got Mad Max and Super Max, um, all from
One
all from Mel
franchise, one
Gibson, all
movie.
from one movie.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you, Mel Gibson.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mel Gibson. Your contributions to the world has been perfect ever since.
I like him from his movie he did with Danny Glover called Closet Races and His One Black Friend.
Those are good movies, though.
Yeah, they were damn good films.
They're damn. It really sucks. I have the box set. I just watched them all 2 weeks ago. It sucks that you look at these movies and go, God, he's such a garbage person, because the two of them on screen are fantastic.
Yeah.
And Danny Glover is fantastic, and Mel Gibson working off Danny
Danny
Glover, and the
Glover.
other way around is fantastic. And then
Yeah.
you find out he's a kind of stupid, kind of garbage. It's like, damn it.
My favorite thing about this, Dan, and we'll move on after this, is that the from the first Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover was one day away from retirement, and Mel
Yeah,
Gibson and Mel Gibson was the kid. By Lethal Weapon 4, they were both the same age.
yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, Danny Glover aged like a fine wine.
Yeah.
As you and I joke, you aging like a fine wine, the black don't crack thing. Literally, if you watch those movies, Mel Gibson ages before your eyes, especially if you watch it back to back. Danny Glover looks like the exact same as he did
Yeah.
in that first movie, from his body, because he takes his shirt off in the first scene and the last one.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about Danny Glover is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And Mel Gibson's like getting the short hair, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious to watch. Joe Pesci aged better than him, and it's Joe Pesci.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The F you when you age you. The F
Okay,
you when you age.
okay. I hope they do a fifth one, because I do like those movies. And that first one is a classic.
That it is. That it is.
Sorry, this is a different podcast
Okay.
for another time.
It's an HNP, whole nother podcast.
We should do that sometimes when it's really boring. It's just anyway. Go ahead.
Call it HNP. We're gonna go with June 7th. Not a lot happened in the ring wrestling wise, but June 7th had some very unique birthdays. Um, on the happy belated 55th birthday to a young man born in Bloomington, Indiana, who would go on to be someone who is good. Happy belated 55th birthday to Mick Foley.
He ended up being someone who was good.
Well, he's not God.
No,
But
you tried to say it, and he says no.
no, he is good. The first professional wrestler to be a New York Times #1 bestseller. And his books I've always enjoyed. He actually signed all of my books that I had when I met him at the at WHYY when he was being interviewed by Terry Gross. Great guy. I took exception because he talked about his Hell in the Cell match with The Undertaker, and that he said that the guys who watch that over and over again and rewind it don't have girlfriends. And I had to tell him, well, I have watched it over and over again, and I do have a girlfriend, so I'm the one.
I am the exception, Mr. Foley.
Yes, but he got a kick out of that. Also born June 7th, and unfortunately we lost him this year, but the Fink would have been 70 years old. Howard Finkel, the first Dan, first employee of the WWE.
Hired the
He
ring
was,
announcer before anybody else, huh?
yep,
Huh.
that was him. And the
Wow.
signature and new and
And
just
the new.
but watching now, you talk about Danny Glover and Mel Gibson. Watch old Fink. Watch Fink from like when he introduced Hulk Hogan during his first title reign to now and to being in the
No,
ring with
not
the
now. Don't look
or
now. It's
no, I
bad.
mean no, he looks very bad now. But when he got inducted into the Hall of Fame, yes, it's a completely different Fink.
Yeah, it is. That's all right.
Yeah, and also born June 7th. Uh, he would have been 96. I don't think he would have made it anyway. But someone that we've argued on this very podcast. To me, maybe the greatest heel of all time. No slight to Roddy Piper, but a happy belated birthday. He would have been 96. Ed Farhat, the original Sheik,
Wow.
the trainer of Sabu, Rob Van Dam,
He would have been how old
among
again?
others. He would have been 96 years old. Yeah,
Probably not, though.
yeah. So when he was in his heyday, so that he was in his 50s when he was on top in Detroit and in Toronto, and he had a 10-year undefeated streak in both of those cities. Multi-time United States champion. He ran the territory, but
Oh,
uh,
sure. Yeah.
the amount of wrestlers that came in or that were brought in just to beat him, staggering. And the feuds that he had, the money that he drew, both in Toronto and in Detroit, even in Texas. The Undertaker told a story about when he did the interview with Steve Austin about his first match in Texas, and that he and his buddies were there in the front row and to see the Sheik, and they said they were going to give it to the Sheik. When the Sheik came out, they were just going to give it to him, man. They were
Yeah.
just going to let him go.
Okay.
And he said, man, the Sheik came out there with his robe, and we were all assholes and elbows. We just run it over. And then after when we got home and everything, it was like, man, I thought you were going to say something. Man, I thought you were going to say something. Um, that was the aura of the Sheik. And the Undertaker, even at 19, was a foot taller than him, but still scared scared the crap out of him. But that was who he was. He was responsible for more riots than probably any professional wrestler in Detroit and Canada. Uh, the foreign objects, the road map forehead, the blood, his feuds with Bobo, with Freddie Blassie, with Andre, legendary. The guy wasn't the best worker, and what made him the best heel of all time and what made fans want to see him lose and want to see him hurt or just want to see him vulnerable through his managers, Ernie Roth, who we know is a Grand Wizard, but when he managed the Sheik, he was Abdullah Farouk, Eddie Creechman later on in his life, Dr. Ken Ramey. The Sheik, through his entire reign of terror in every territory, from Detroit to Toronto to Texas. He went to Georgia, he went to Florida, and in Los Angeles against Freddie Blassie. Never said a word ever during his whole career. Never spoke. You can watch Sheik matches all over YouTube, Sheik promos with whoever his manager was at the time, but the Sheik, arguably the greatest heel of all time, never said one word during his entire career.
Wow.
During his entire wrestling career, never did a promo. So, uh, but he would have been 96, June 7th. June 8th, 1988, Dan, was only the second Clash of Champions ever in Miami Beach. Stat card: United States champion Barry Windham beat Brad Armstrong in a great match between two of the best workers in all of wrestling at that point. The United States Tag Team Champions, the Fantastics, beat the Sheepherders, who you will know as the Bushwhackers. Um, Jimmy and Ronnie Garvin defeated the Varsity Club of Mike Rotundo and Rick Steiner. And the main event was Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson, who were right now in AEW, They lost by disqualification to Sting and Dusty Rhodes.
Good.
Where was Ric Flair at the time, you say? The
Who
current
cares?
NWA champion? He was doing commentary with Tony Schiavone.
Good.
Yeah.
That's where he belongs. Not messing with Sting, son bitch.
But that second
I'm
clash
not bitter.
no, look, just a little. Not even at all. But the second Clash of Champions did a 4.8 on TBS that night. Yep. On that same day, June 8th, 1997, Triple H defeated both Ahmed Johnson and the aforementioned Mick Foley, Mankind, in one night to win the King of the Ring tournament. So Hunter got his King of the Ring maybe a year after he was supposed to, um, thanks to the curtain call. But yes,
The curtain call.
the curtain call. Um, June 9th, Johnny Walker. Have I mentioned that name before?
Who?
Johnny Rubberman Walker and his tag team partner, the Sundown Kid, defeated the team of Johnny Long and Tojo Yamamoto for the NWA Southern Tag Team Championship. I mentioned Johnny Walker in the late 60s, had a great career, won many regional titles, and got shots at the NWA title many times. But that was in 1969. That same date, Dan, in 1973, Mr. Wrestling 2 and his tag team partner, another young man that would get the rub from being his partner, Mr. Wrestling 2 and Bob Orton Jr. Defeated the Infernos to be the Georgia Tag Team Championship, to win the Georgia Tag Team Championship. So exactly 4 years, Johnny Walker won a tag team title, and 4 years later, Mr. Wrestling 2 won a tag team title.
I don't know what happened to Johnny Walker, but
Yeah,
thank God that Mr. Wrestling 2 came along.
Yeah, I heard it was a neck injury that Toru Tanaka injured his neck to the point where Johnny Walker would never wrestle again.
Was that in Rio de Janeiro?
Might have been. It was a tournament that happened later on that night. But yeah.
That's what happened.
That is what happened. So so Johnny Walker, 69 and 73, and Mr. Wrestling 2 and 73, both won the tag team titles 4 years apart. Two men, two different people, both won tag team titles. June 9th, staying on June 9th, Dan, 1991, at the beautiful Manatee Civic Center in wonderful, tropical Palmetto, Florida, far away from any major city in Florida.
Convention Center. I need to look this place up. Go ahead.
The Manatee Civic Center in lovely tropical Palmetto, Florida, was the site, Dan, on June 9th, 1991, of UWF Beach Brawl.
Oh, that's right. The Braden event. Okay, yeah.
Herb Abrams' first, last, and final pay-per-view for the UWF. Hosted by Craig DeGeorge and Bruno Sammartino. This was going to be the epic pay-per-view that was going to be the direct competition to both the WWF and NWA. And the card goes, these were some of the matches that took place on that UWF Beach Brawl card.
I'm reading it too.
The Blackhearts, managed by Luna Vachon, defeated Firecat and Jim Cooper, whoever they were.
Sure.
Terry Gordy went against Johnny Ace, who was substituting for Magnificent Morocco, who either couldn't make it or knew what the garbage truck fire was going to be, so he skipped.
I'm not coming.
But Terry Gordy and Johnny Ace went to a double countout. The Killer Bees defeated the Power Twins. Only, Dan, because they couldn't call them that, because the WWF owned that name, the Killer Bees were called Masked Confusion. Now, I don't know why they couldn't have been called the Hive or the Murder Hornets or something from the Bee family, but they went from the Killer Bees wearing the same yellow and black mask, yellow and black tights, and were called Masked Confusion. Uh, also,
Sure.
Paul Orndorff defeated Colonel De Beers in a strap match, even though he won with a pile driver. So I don't know what the straps were for exactly.
Neither
Uh,
do they.
Bob Backlund defeated Ivan Koloff and with the Backlund Bridge in 3 minutes. Now, I've seen Bob Backlund and Ivan Koloff wrestle right here at the Spectrum in Philly. 2 matches went to no contest, and even in a cage match between Backlund and Ivan Koloff, Backlund won by escaping the cage. Yet in this UWF Beach Brawl, Bob Backlund defeats Ivan Koloff in 3 minutes. What a difference 10 years makes.
Sure.
And the dynamic tag team of Stevie Ray and Sonny Beach, not Booker T's brother, but the other Stevie Ray and Sonny Beach, defeated the team of Cactus Jack and the aforementioned Bob Orton Jr., who he was now Cowboy Bob Orton. Forgive me. Yes.
That reminded me, and I don't think I brought it up when we talked about that Dark Side of the Ring, but who is Sonny Beach kidding thinking he was going to be a big superstar?
Himself?
I was watching it going, are you kidding? No, just sort of disrespect, I guess. I don't mean to be like F Sonny Beach, but I'm like, no.
I guess Sonny Beach thought at the time, now this is 1991, and his gimmick was catchy. No one else was doing it, save for the Sandman a couple years later, who would come to the ring in a bodysuit and a surfboard. But Sonny Beach's gimmick, at the time, no one else was doing it but him. And as an indie darling, and indies weren't really a thing back then, he got a tremendous response, and he was over with the crowd. Not a bad-looking guy. So,
No.
I guess to him, he thought he could be. And hitching his wagon to a guy like Herb Abrams with all this money and all this clout, and
Coke.
the UWF is going to be the biggest federation, the biggest new wrestling organization in the United States. Why wouldn't he think he was going to be a big star? But as we know how that turned out, well, they did defeat, with his partner Stevie Ray, they did defeat Cactus Jack and Cowboy Bob Orton. So there's that. Thanks to interference by John Tolis, who hit Cactus Jack by accident with
Thanks a
brass
lot,
knuckles.
John.
Yeah, coach.
Bastard.
And the main event.
The way you said it. And the main event. Oh, God.
But still, two Hall of Famers, though. Two of the greats. Dr. Death Steve Williams defeated Bam Bam Bigelow for the UWF. Now, this is for the UWF TV title. I don't know why it wasn't for the UWF Heavyweight Championship, because even though they had a TV gig on Sports Channel, so I guess that was the #1 title.
I guess.
But Dr. Death Steve Williams defeated Bam Bam Bigelow for the UWF TV champion to become the first UWF TV champion. So the trivia question: Dr. Death Steve Williams not only became a UWF champion, was not only the last UWF champion in the Mid-South, he was the first UWF champion for the new UWF. But hard to believe it, Dan, with all that talent and all that, all those great wrestlers and all that obviously great wrestling, the show only lasted less than 2 hours. In front of a whopping 567 fans.
Oh, my God, I forgot the number.
And did a 0.1 buy rate. You have no idea how much I wanted to say. 0.0.
0.0. Case said it was the final round of the Sports Channel title tournament on purpose.
Okay.
So that's why. And Case also said that the greatest UWF Abrams match ever is still Stevie Ray versus Steve Williams.
I'll take your word for it.
No, don't.
No. Okay, but yes, I mentioned Dark Side of the Ring before, but this was, if you've seen the Dark Side of the Ring, the Herb Abrams story, this was the zenith, the pay-per-view they were all talking about, and it's going to blow your mind. It's really going to blow your mind. If they just focused on Herb Abrams' boots, the buy rate would have gone up so far. because that's what was a fascinating thing. That's what was missed was
Those
the boots
goddamn boots, man.
of Herb Abrams. but but the beach brawl, the UWF beach brawl, the thing that the first, last, and only, the thing that would eventually sink Herb Abrams, took place
Uh,
this week in history, June 9th, 1991.
uh, that's amazing. I'm so
Yeah.
glad we relived that again.
Unfortunately, some of the wrestlers are still reliving it.
Uh,
But in the words of the great Brian Blair, Herb left us doing what he loved.
Coke and blowing hookers.
Hookers and blow. Yes. Should all be so lucky. And it finally brings us to today. Today in wrestling history. June 10th, 1983, Dan, in St. Louis, Missouri, the site of more world title changes in any city in the United States or Japan. Harley Race pinned Ric Flair for the NWA Heavyweight Championship for his record-breaking 7th time and ending the first title reign of Ric Flair. And if you recall, on last week's Wrestling Historian, I mentioned that Harley Race won the Central States Heavyweight title from Dewey Robertson before he became the missing link. He won that on June 2nd. Well, he was still Central States champion when he won the NWA title from Ric Flair on this date. And if that wasn't enough, and by God, don't you think it ought to be, Harley Race was still the Missouri State Heavyweight Champion, a title he won on May
bad.
13th. So Harley Race, by winning the NWA Heavyweight title for a then record 7th time, he had to vacate both the Missouri State Championship and the Central States Heavyweight title.
That's just madness, Craig.
That is madness. But madness, thy name is Harley Race, because on this date in 1983, he was once again the very best wrestler on God's green earth.
God's green earth.
The toughest man to walk into a wrestling ring. And on the same date, Dan, it happened 18 years ago,
Yeah.
but I included it just because of something that we've talked about on this very podcast. But it happened on this date in 2002. Stone Cold Steve Austin walked out of Raw without clearing it with anyone in management, without telling anyone. After a phone call with Jim Ross, when Jim informed him that he would be going up against Brock Lesnar that night with zero build-up, with zero prep, zero announcements beforehand, Steve Austin walked out of Raw. Booked a plane ticket with his then wife Deborah, and flew from Atlanta, where he just wrestled in some house shows, and flew right back to San Antonio, Texas, and left the company. Now, the timing is curious because previously on Raw, Steve Austin had defeated Triple H to win the services of Ric Flair as his manager. So instead of forwarding that storyline, because Steve Austin walked out, they had to rewrite the entire Raw. And it ended up Ric Flair, who was a heel last week, would be wrestling on that Raw Vince McMahon. So Flair and Vince McMahon had no intention of wrestling. When he found out that Steve Austin had left the company, they rewrote all of Raw, and they made the match Vince McMahon versus Ric Flair, with the winner getting controlling interest of the WWF. So Flair had to go from heel to face within a week. And they dropped that whole storyline with Ric Flair being the manager of Steve Austin because Triple H had lost to Steve Austin. So we never got to see the Flair Austin manager wrestler combo, which would have been awesome just for the promos alone. But because they told Steve Austin that he would be going against Brock Lesnar and losing to Brock Lesnar, Austin walked out of the company. Now, Austin already had feuds set up with Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit league coming up, which would have been amazing matches. But Austin walked out of the company on this date, June 9th. I'm sorry, today, June 10th, 2002.
I mean, I agree with Austin on that one.
Hmm.
Why? Why not on a pay-per-view? Why is Brock Lesnar beating me on a random Raw? No. Not happening. I'm leaving.
And that's one of the times where people have to when Stone Cold realized who he was, and you can say stuff like that,
Yeah.
and they say, you know what, I'm not doing this stuff. Things that I wished other wrestlers, even announcers, would do. When I see Jim Ross doing something stupid, I said, you you have to know who you are. You're Jim effing Ross. If you don't want to do something like kiss Vince McMahon's ass on national television with your family in the front row, say I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
And you saw when Steve Austin walked out of the company how they had to redo everything. And he eventually came back, but even if he didn't, it's because of, hey, I'm Steve Austin. This doesn't work for Amy, and not that Steve Austin ever had a job. He had a problem doing a job to Brock Lesnar. It's exactly what you said. Why are we doing it with no buildup? Why is this not on a pay-per-view? Why is this not in a major arena or stadium somewhere? So this was the first time Steve Austin had ever walked out of the WWE.
Wow.
But it happened 18 years ago, and that, gentlemen and ladies, is the wrestling historian.
I would like to thank Case, Rev, Julia, Aegon, Blitch, Pike, Short, for Silk,
Love that name.
Risby, Storsina, Danny, Rich, and, well, I'm not going to thank Harry. The hell with him. For all coming in, I would like to thank Aaron for the subscription. Thank you for subscribing.
Thank you, Aaron.
Yes, thank you. Maybe I'll see a dime of it one day. We'll find out soon. I'll find out soon. Craig, where do people follow you, sir?
They can follow me if they so choose on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter at Craig Ligons, CraigLiGeons.
Follow me on Twitter at DanLaw83. Subscribe to YouTube or where you're watching right now on Twitch, or if you're watching now on YouTube, wherever you're watching this, subscribe, please. That would be wonderful. And listen to the audio version on your smartphone. Go to your podcast app, type in VOC Nation Radio Network, or to go to vocnation.com to listen to all of the episodes. This show, Stadium Journey, Obey the Puck, it's all there now on the VOC Nation Radio Network. For Craig Ligons, I'm the above average comedian, Dan Calchico. We will see you next week, hopefully with Mr. Gator. Goodbye, everybody.